Hello and welcome. I'm Jacqueline Whitmore, and this is Ask the Etiquette Expert. And today I have a special series for you. I'm going to be bringing on a guest, which I will be doing from time to time. Usually it's just me coming on every Tuesday at 2 and answering all of your etiquette questions. But I thought I would make today's show a little bit more interesting by bringing on someone who loves manners and etiquette as much, if not more, than I do. And our special guest today is none other but Richie Frieman. He is also known as the Manners Guy. He has a very popular website on quickanddirtytips.com. And before I bring him on, I'm going to just share a little bit about him because he has had a colorful and quite interesting career before he started writing etiquette books. He wrote an awful lot of other books, including children's books. But let me just give you a little bit of background information. Richie is an author, illustrator, artist, entrepreneur, screenwriter, cartoonist, and even a champion professional wrestler. Now, that just goes to show that etiquette is not for sissies. He's the #1 best-selling and award-winning author and illustrator of 7 books in multiple genres, with works being sold worldwide. And over the years, Richie has been featured on multiple media outlets, including Fox News Entertainment, MSNBC, Time Magazine, Money Magazine, Yahoo, Martha Stewart, Forbes Magazine, The Wall Street Journal, and more. And if you would like to get a taste of what he sounds like, you just go to quickanddirtytips.com and just look for Modern Manners Guy, and you'll see who Richie is. So I'm just going to bring him on the screen and introduce him to you. Hi, Richie.
Hey there, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. Etiquette is a female-dominated industry, and it is so refreshing to see a man who loves etiquette as much as I do. So welcome.
I appreciate that. Look, I think when I've been doing the Modern Manners Guy for quite some time now, and it's interesting what people are, the questions they have, the questions they come up with me for, and what they email me with from all over the world. But I will say that when I like to look at manners and etiquette, I look at it from a humor side, and it's things that we can all relate to. And we do a lot of the normal etiquette items and manners, but I like to make things that's funny and realistic as possible that people can relate to, things they witness.
Well, you almost have to, because etiquette can be perceived as a very stuffy, off-putting subject to a lot of people. And with the new generation coming into the workplace now, you have to also make it relatable. And that's exactly what you do. And I'm so proud of you for having this podcast to reach the masses, because I think that we need so much more of that. But I want to ask you a little bit about your background, and I want to go way back.
Okay.
I want to know where you're from, where you grew up, and who were some people in your life who influenced you to be who you are today.
Thank you. So I appreciate that. So, going way back, I was born in Richmond, Virginia. I lived there for only about a couple of years before moving to Baltimore, Maryland, where I live now. Grew up here, went to the University of Maryland, College Park. I was an art major. Art was pretty much the only thing I was somewhat good at, but then got into writing and so forth. But, when I think about the people who really inspired me growing up, and really today, I mean, one, I got to say my parents, and I would say both, even my parents and my step-parents. I was very fortunate that my parents both married wonderful people, and they've encouraged and entertained my sense of humor and my projects and my creativity and my writing. So very, very happy for that. And then also as of recent, when not recent, but I have 2 kids. My daughter's 14, my son is 10. And I think when you become a parent and things start to, move around in your head, your priorities change. I definitely look at that as somebody that is two people that have definitely changed my life and made me try to become a better person every day. And not to say that always happens so quick and easily, but that's what I'm trying to make them happy every day.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, just etiquette for kids is a whole nother subject in and of itself. So
Yes,
I'm hopeful that you have very well-mannered kids.
I like to think I do. I try very, very hard. We're working on the dining etiquette. You know, the mouth, truth, your mouth closed, fork, knife. We're working on. That's my, that's my. I stay on a soapbox where I try to get that going in. But overall, yes, they're well received by their coaches and teachers. So I look forward that I think I'm doing a good job so far. My wife takes a lot of that kudos there too.
Are you teaching them the continental style of dining?
I'm teaching them to make sure they don't just look like a slob while they eat. I think that's step one to making sure that they're not using their shirt as a napkin or chewing with your mouth closed, not eating too much. The little things that make people just roll their eyes. And I will say they're getting very good at it. My hope is that once they get older, they're more into it, learning how to use a fork and a knife properly. I think is a very big lost art. And thankfully, some kids are more eager to learn than others.
Well, I'm happy to know that you're carrying on that tradition. And I just want to ask you before we go into some of the etiquette questions that I also get asked. I want to know how did you come into the world of etiquette? Were you introduced to it by someone? I noticed you have a couple of books that you've written, and you might want to share with our viewers the titles of those books so they can check them out. And how did you come to become an etiquette expert?
So it's funny, when as I said, I've written over 7 books, published 7 books. There were I've either written an illustrator or just written. I have a children's book series called Turple that I wrote and illustrated. I wrote a book, YA novel with my kids' names in it called Maddie and Cole and the Food Truck Grand Prix. I have a romance novel that's it's more Hallmark movie than romance. I have to make sure I put that out there, called Where the Heart Left Off. And I also am working on the manners book that really, really propelled me was a book called Reply All and Other Ways to Tank Your Career, which is almost a decade old. And I'm very, very proud of it. Was proud of it as well. Also still proud of it to this day. But when I got into the manners and etiquette world, I was approached by somebody that I knew, and she was an editor. And my background's kind of funky. I do little fun things, and I've experienced a lot of different careers and dabbled in there. And they were looking for somebody that had a sense of humor that could talk about manners and etiquette in a lighthearted but actionable way to offer advice. And I basically had to audition in a way. I had to make a podcast. I had to write a podcast, I write a blog, do the podcast, and then my first one, I believe it was about Facebook etiquette, and they liked it. And I was like, all right, this is, finally somebody gets my sense of humor. And my approach with manners and etiquette have been and always will be really about putting things in proper perspective for people that of all ages understand as many real-time things as possible. We've all been stuck behind the line at Starbucks or a coffee place, and somebody's on their phone as they're trying to order to the barista, or we've dealt with, bad business meetings where you just want to crawl under the chair and never come back up, or when dealing with tipping or anything that is a real life situation. I decided to make it fun and make it funny and but offer that real advice. And I started making cartoons that go along with each of my topics that, again, help to just draw more sense of humor and satire to the situation. And I've really enjoyed the process and just happy to do it all the time.
What an evolution. So it wasn't something that you necessarily set out to do. It wasn't something that you said after college, I'm going to become an etiquette expert. What did you want to become when you grew up?
Well, it's funny because, you mentioned that not a lot of men are involved in the etiquette field. And then when they are, a lot of it is with fashion, which I love. I love fashion, love clothes. But it's also more I think the stereotype with matters of etiquette, and from the men's side too, is really like staunch and proper and almost military-esque in a way of like following things. But that's really not, to me, what I look at it for. And when I was getting into the etiquette field, it was like, look, I just don't want people to be a jerk. I want to make sure people can really speak properly to others and their peers, to be able to, be an adult about things and not hold everything with a chip on their shoulder. But there's a good way to kind of walk away without having to engage, but also make things funny and lighthearted to the fact that you can go ahead and evenly talk about it. And I always find that humor is a really good way to do that. And that's been my biggest focus. When I was in college, I was a good student in the fact that I always paid attention. I was a good kid, but I wasn't a very good student in grade wise. But I was always into art. So I went to school for art. I was going to go with graphic design and get into advertising. And I did. And then I started doing more with communications and marketing and business. And then one thing evolved to the next. And, I started working on my books. And the more situations I put myself in that I was not used to or comfortable with normally, things about what I witnessed regarding manners and etiquette became prevalent. And I realized, okay, I'm putting myself in all these awkward situations, and the things that I'm picking up from other people are the attitudes or things that I witnessed. And I'm no angel, by the way, but I've learned, and it's that I realized that there's something that needs to be messaged out there. And so that's why I was able to take my experiences in a variety of different fields and figure out the best way to make it important for other people to read.
Mm-hmm. What kind of reaction do you get from people whenever you tell them you have an etiquette podcast or you're an etiquette expert, or maybe you don't necessarily use that title, but how do people generally act towards you when they find out that you do this?
Well, it was funny. I'll never forget this one time. I was at a playground with one of my good friends and his son. And I hadn't seen him in a little while, and I ran into him, and his son was having a temper tantrum. And he's like, quick, don't say anything. Richie's going to write about that. And he was laughing, but I mean, it was a joke. Obviously, I wasn't going to. But when people find out that I do this, and I'm always open to that. I mean, I put it all over my bio and my website and LinkedIn and things like that. They ask me different questions about what I find to be the rudest things that I tend to come up with, or I'm open about people's stories they send me. I never share their names or backgrounds, but I talk about things that people have reached out to me about and out of respect for them, because also to show that awareness and to talk to people regarding different issues. I think that people they find it funny that I do it, only because, I am a guy that I have a very funky background from, wrestle, like you said, from pro wrestling to writer and business, that it doesn't, that they're trying to figure out where the road kind of comes to the point. But I look at that and I say, look, it's my views on matters and etiquette are just based upon life experiences and how we learn from those experiences and share them with others as to what can be done better and what shouldn't be done anymore.
I agree. And I have seen etiquette evolve over the years. I started my career as an etiquette expert in 1998, before many of us had websites. And I really had very few role models. And I would be asked questions that I didn't necessarily know the answers to. And I'm sure you're experiencing that too after the pandemic, or especially during the pandemic, because we had never heard of mask etiquette or Zoom funerals or Zoom weddings or social distancing. And so a lot of these conundrums that we were faced with, we had to come up with the answers on the fly.
Yeah. I will say that the pandemic really obviously changed the world and people's attitudes, but it totally revamped the way people interact. I mean, what we're doing now here, it was, to think about this as the norm, 3 years ago, it just wasn't really something that people would make sense about. I mean, everything from fashion, what you would wear to work changed, the work environment changed, travel changed, everything. And you have to be sensitive, you have to be aware, but a lot of people had a hard time moving with those changes and accepting those changes. And I think that's where a lot of the problems came up. But I mean, the pandemic really just reworked everything we knew, and we have definitely to add some more steps to everything.
I'm speaking with Richie Frieman. He is the host of the podcast Modern Manners Guy on quickanddirtytips.com. And this is Ask the Etiquette Expert. So for those of you who are just joining us, we invite you to type your questions in the chat. If you're watching us on Facebook or LinkedIn, you can just do that and we'll see your questions. And for those of you who are joining us on YouTube, welcome. Just give us a thumbs up, a subscribe, a like, check out Richie's website, and let him know how much you appreciate all the work that he's doing. So let's talk about some etiquette questions. I know you did a podcast, Richie, on tipping etiquette not too long ago. And that's one of the questions that I get asked most frequently. In fact, just yesterday, I was on an NBC affiliate in Minneapolis, and the host was asking me all about tipping, and it's changed since the pandemic. And maybe you've experienced walking into a fast food restaurant and you go to pay, and then there's that little tip bar.
Yep.
Do you want to add a tip? What kind of advice would you give our viewers whenever they see this new thing that says, would you like to add a tip? What are some of your guidelines?
Well, it's funny. Like you said, I get this asked all the time. And, it's one of these things that unfortunately, I think the people behind the register have are taking the grunt of it, when it's obviously not their fault. It's the company's fault. But it is something that I've seen in real life. I mean, when they flip that iPad over and they're staring at you and you want to add a 25% tip onto a, $2.50 coffee, it's like, what is going on here? And this isn't about how much money you have or how much money you don't have. This is just about what's right or wrong. And all of these quick access with the credit card and the tipping things, they just add a lot of awkwardness to the situation. And it was one of these things where it's gotten out of hand. And look, I waited tables for a very, very long time. I serve drinks. I understand what it's like to live on tips. But there used to be a barrier that allowed you to discreetly add your tip or not, however you like. And now it's very much in your face. In fact, the other day I was at a restaurant and a lot of people come by and they have this device where you put your credit card in, they stare at you while you type everything in. I think that is the worst thing possible, because apparently long gone are the days where you give your card or cash and they go over back to the register and come back and drop it off discreetly. Now it's right in front of you. You're sitting there making a tough decision. You're staring at the person as you're trying to figure out, are they a good server or not? And I just find that to be very awkward for the diner. And I know the waiter or waitress has to do it, but I find it very awkward for them as well. And I think that it tends to happen more when you use a credit card and takeout etiquette. Takeout tipping is a big thing I get. Like, I get people call me all the time or say to me all the time, they're like, look, I just went to pick up the pizza. All the person did was hand the pizza to me from the table. Like, they had no choice but to do that activity. Like, that was the only action that had to be done for us to complete this engagement, and now I have to tip them for simply doing that. And I understand that. And then I also find that it's something where usually those screens that flip around and things like that don't happen if you pay with cash. And it's more of a credit card thing that are being used. And so it almost defeats the purpose, where if I go someplace and I pay for cash, there's no awkwardness about the tipping, nor are they asking me for a tip, but only when I pay for a credit card. So it was a very interesting dilemma now. And I think that a lot of people are having a difficult time understanding where and when and how much. Am I going to look like I'm, being selfish by not giving a lot? Is when you take 20% on a $2.50 coffee, granted that may not be a lot of money, so to say, but it's 20% of anything. So it's still, percentage-wise, we're equal as if it was a fine dining restaurant. So I find that's happening a lot more, and the stress is on both sides.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the percentages, because that was one of the questions that I was asked. The host said, well, what is now the customary percentage to tip someone, let's say in a diner or a restaurant? And do you come off as being cheap if you don't tip them that certain amount? So my question to you is, how much do you normally recommend that people tip when they go into their favorite restaurant? And I'm not talking about just fast food. I'm talking about a sit down
Yeah.
restaurant where you're enjoying a meal with your family.
So, when it comes to tipping, tipping is it's a part of the service offering. You're tipping on how well the service was, not just because you have no choice and that's an obligation you have to make. You do not have to tip. Now, I definitely disagree with that. But if you have a waiter and the food is cold, they're rude, they spill something on you, it's a debacle of a day. I don't necessarily know if that qualifies or quantitates to be a positive tip. I do always think they're leaving something because you're better than that experience. I start with 20% as my normal situation, and then I tip up from there. Now that's just me, but if you look at you mentioned like a diner. The other day I was traveling for work. I went to a place and I got a coffee and a muffin. All right, my bill came to be like around 8 something for both those items. Now 20% on that, I forgot to do the math, but it's not much. So am I supposed to give them, $3 tip because it just the meal was less? I mean, the service was the same as if it was anything else. I'm tipping on my meal, the purchase I made, and the service that they gave me, which is fair based upon normal standard rules. So I don't feel like people have to go broke because you are out of guilt or because your check was so low. And that happens a lot with coffee, coffee and things like that, where, you sit down, you order a coffee. Coffee's not very expensive. Let's say it comes out to $4. Well, you're supposed to be tipping them, $2 or $3 just because
it's like a beer.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I mean, if you think about everything else in your life, can you imagine tipping 30, 40, 50% on anything else you buy? When you go to the grocery store, tip the cashier. They're doing more work than somebody is who's just handing a pizza to you like that. I mean, you have to tip 30 or 20% on top of your regular grocery bill. So it doesn't, when it comes to those things, I look at the service and I look at the obligation. Now, if there is a fine dining establishment, there's an air of quality and ambiance in which you're buying and what you're paying for, which is totally normal. But again, it's all about service. I mean, I work very, very hard for my money and I expect that of other people. But in the same sense, I'm not going to be guilted into giving up more than I should because, you think I should be giving you more when my bill is only a certain number. So that's really where I think the rub comes in and gets people a little frustrated.
I agree. We have a question from one of our viewers. This is from Dave. Dave has a question about tipping. He said, what is the proper action to take when gratuity is already added, but the tip option still appears?
Dave, that's a great question. And the tip is already there and that's what you get. Why are you mandatory to have that happen? I mean, this happened to me last week. I went to dinner. It was me and my friend and our sons, and they added tip on there, and I didn't even catch it at first. And I went and I was about to do it, and he goes, "Oh no!" My buddy was like, "Yeah, the tip's already on there." I was like, "Oh, okay." And crossed it out, and just left what it was. I mean, again, why am I? I was being forced, almost tricked in that aspect to add more tip on there, because adding your tip on there isn't always the norm anymore. But in large groups, they tend to add the tip and that's it. But I don't feel obligated to add more than what's necessary strictly because I feel guilty doing it. And I think that's really what has come to it, that people feel that they're going to be judged. But whenever I look at a situation where I'm worried about how the other point of view is going to view me or my actions, I always look at it as, well, who's really right in the situation? Am I wrong because I don't want to have to tip twice 40% if I didn't realize that's what it, already included on top of what it was? Or are they wrong because they're insisting I do more simply because they try to pull one on us? I look at if the tip is in there, the tip's in there. I stick to 20, and then if I feel like it deserves more, by all means I will pay more. But I think that technique is a little tricky for me.
Yeah, I got tricked not too long ago, and it was just myself and my fiance. It wasn't a big party of 6 or 8, and it was dark, and I clearly did not have my glasses, and I added the tip. And then when I got home, I realized that I had almost given double. And I figured, well, hopefully tipping is good karma, and what goes around will come around. But I have started paying more attention since
Yeah.
that day.
Yeah. And I look, service is earned. And I think that they are, I respect, I was in their shoes many, many, many times. But I think there's also a barrier in which it comes, okay, well, unfortunately, what you got versus what and where you are, that's just really what it comes down to. And you shouldn't feel guilty because you have to meet some kind of standard that isn't fair for the diner.
We have one more comment here. This is from Teresa. She says, I agree with your thoughts on tipping. I picked up a cake at a bakery and a sign at the register said 5% added to pay for employees' health insurance. I heard that too, that there's a wellness charge that is being added onto some of these at some of these establishments. She says, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, from a business standpoint, I would have just wrapped that into the cost and not even talked about it. Why make it awkward? It's one of those situations where you're looking at it now, and now you're thinking to yourself, why would you tell me that? Why you're making me feel guilty now that I have to do something else because I'm helping to support their medical needs, which I'm very appreciative of, but that's something to me you just got to hide. I don't know. I think it's also improper to talk about that. And now you're making people feel guilty about things. And, and look, if the 5% has already been added, you're not going to argue about it. I think then you make a big stink about it is just going to make you look really bad, unfortunately, even though you have no choice, which I'm a big proponent of speaking up for yourself when it comes to those situations. But right now, there's no way you're going to get out of it. It's already built in there. So I wish places like that would just tack on an extra 5% to the bill. And I had no idea you did it. And that can be just rolled into the price.
I agree. And I know we are just about at the end of our half hour. And I so appreciate you spending this time with me and with our viewers. And as soon as I received the press release about you and your podcast, I said to myself, I really have to introduce this man to my audience, because all of the wonderful things that you're producing and the information that you are talking about is so timely. So before I let you go, I want to know a little bit about how people can get in touch with you, and if there are any other books or freebies you want to give away, please share that with the audience as well.
Well, thank you very much. The Modern Manners Guy is run by Macmillan Publishing. They own a company called quickanddirtytips.com. There are a tremendous amount of other hosts on there too that talk from all an array of different topics, from grammar to health to fitness. And I welcome you all to go on there and check out my fellow hosts. You can look me up there under Modern Manners Guy. You can email me at manners@quickanddirtytips.com. You can follow me on Twitter as well at Richie Frieman, and also at Manners QDT. And then also on Facebook, you can find Modern Manners Guy there. And I'm always happy to take questions and talk to folks. I love hearing stories. I love it so much from all across the world. Anything you need help with, I'm happy to talk about it.
And I'm really appreciative of your time, Richie. And just for those of you who are tuning in, this is Ask the Etiquette Expert. I do this live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I have a little freebie for anyone who wants to be more poised and polished when they go to a dinner party. I have a free ebook called Master Your Mingle Ability. And if you go to my website, etiquetteexpert.com, you've got to scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says get your free ebook. And all you have to do is fill in your first name and email address, and you'll get that immediately. So, well, our time is up, and I want to thank you again, Richie, for everything and for all the good work that you're doing. And it's been a real joy just getting to know you, and I hope we can do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I always love talking about these topics, and I'm glad that I have another fellow champion in the corner to help everybody out there just live a more mannerly life. And anything I can do, please reach out to me. I love being on the show.
I certainly will. And perhaps during the holidays, I'll have you back on and you and I can talk about all the holiday
Ooh,
conundrums, everything from
that's, oh man, we can talk for hours on that one. That sounds great to me, though.
Yes, we might have to block off an extra half hour for that one. But anyway, thank you so much.
Great.
Just stay on the line a little bit and we'll say our goodbyes. But until then, I want to thank you. And I want to also thank uh, you, our viewers, most of all for your loyalty, for your support, and most of all, your love of everything etiquette. And I'm Jacqueline Whitmore. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.